The Five Sisters of York by Charles Dickens, performed by Rob Goll. A brief introduction. This short story features in Chapter 6 of The Life and Adventures of Nicholas Nickleby, Charles Dickens's third novel, in which the occurrence of an accident leads to the sharing of stories. In this delightful yet unexpected turn of events from Nicholas Nickleby, Dickens presents a motley crew of coach passengers thrown together by an accident that temporarily halts their journey. Among them are Nicholas Nickleby himself, the ever-scheming Mr. Squeers, and a cast of characters each nursing their own eccentricities. Finding themselves stuck in a modest inn, a cheerful gentleman proposes a bowl of punch and a few tales to pass the time. As the fire crackles and the punch is passed around, the conversation shifts to York Minster, inspiring one of the gentlemen to begin his story, a solemn and evocative tale of The Five Sisters of York. A great many years ago, for the 15th century was scarce 2 years old at the time, and King Henry IV sat upon the throne of England, there dwelt, in the ancient city of York, 5 maiden sisters, the subjects of my tale. These 5 sisters were all of surpassing beauty. The eldest was in her 23rd year, the second a year younger, the third a year younger than the second, and the fourth a year younger than the third. They were tall, stately figures with dark, flashing eyes and hair of jet. Dignity and grace were in their every movement, and the fame of their great beauty had spread through all the country round. But if the 4 elder sisters were lovely, how beautiful was the youngest, a fair creature of 16. The blushing tints in the soft bloom on the fruit, or the delicate painting on the flower, are not more exquisite than was the blending of the rose and lily in her gentle face, or the deep blue of her eye. The vine, in all its elegant luxuriance, is not more graceful than were the clusters of rich brown hair that sported round her brow. If we all had hearts like those which beat so lightly in the bosoms of the young and beautiful, what a heaven this earth would be! If, while our bodies grow old and withered, our hearts could but retain their early youth and freshness, of what avail would be our sorrows and sufferings? But the faint image of Eden which is stamped upon them in childhood chafes and rubs in our rough struggles with the world, and soon wears away, too often to leave nothing but a mournful blank remaining. The heart of this fair girl bounded with joy and gladness. Devoted attachment to her sisters and a fervent love of all beautiful things in nature were its pure affections. Her gleesome voice and merry laugh were the sweetest music of their home. She was its very light and life. The brightest flowers in the garden were reared by her. The caged birds sang when they heard her voice, and pined when they missed its sweetness. Alice, dear Alice, what living thing within the sphere of her gentle witchery could fail to love her? You may seek in vain now for the spot on which these sisters lived, for their very names have passed away, and dusty antiquaries tell of them as of a fable. But they dwelt in an old wooden house, old even in those days, with overhanging gables and balconies of rudely carved oak, which stood within a pleasant orchard and was surrounded by a rough stone wall, whence a stout archer might have winged an arrow to St. Mary's Abbey. The old abbey flourished then, and the 5 sisters living on its fair domains paid yearly dues to the black monks of St. Benedict, to which fraternity it belonged. It was a bright and sunny morning in the pleasant time of summer, when one of those black monks emerged from the abbey portal and bent his steps towards the house of the fair sisters. heaven above was blue and the earth beneath was green. The river glistened like a path of diamonds in the sun. The birds poured forth their songs from the shady trees. The lark soared high above the waving corn, and the deep buzz of insects filled the air. Everything looked gay and smiling. But the holy man walked gloomily on with his eyes bent upon the ground. The beauty of the earth is but a breath, and man is but a shadow. What sympathy should a holy preacher have with either? With eyes bent upon the ground, then, or only raised enough to prevent his stumbling over such obstacles as lay in his way, the religious man moved slowly forward, until he reached a small postern in the wall of the sisters' orchard, through which he passed, closing it behind him. The noise of soft voices in conversation and of merry laughter fell upon his ears ere he had advanced many paces, and raising his eyes higher than was his humble wont, he descried at no great distance the 5 sisters seated on the grass with Alice in the centre, all busily plying their customary task of embroidering. "Save you, fair daughters," said the friar, and fair in truth they were. Even a monk might have loved them as choice masterpieces of his Maker's hand. The sisters saluted the holy man with becoming reverence, and the eldest motioned him to a mossy seat beside them. But the good friar shook his head and bumped himself down on a very hard stone, at which, no doubt, approving angels were gratified. "Ye were merry, daughters," said the monk. "You know how light of heart sweet Alice is," replied the eldest sister, passing her fingers through the tresses of the smiling girl. "And what joy and cheerfulness it wakes up within us to see all nature beaming in brightness and sunshine, father," added Alice, blushing beneath the stern look of the recluse. The monk answered not, save by a grave inclination of the head, and the sisters pursued their task in silence. "Still wasting the precious hours," said the monk at length, turning to the eldest sister as he spoke. "Still wasting the precious hours on this vain trifling. Alas, alas, that the few bubbles on the surface of eternity, all that heaven wills we should see of that dark, deep stream, should be so lightly scattered." "Father," urged the maiden, pausing, as did each of the others in her busy task, "we have prayed at matins. Our daily alms have been distributed at the gate. The sick peasants have been tended. All our morning tasks have been performed. I hope our occupation is a blameless one." "See here," said the friar, taking the frame from her hand. "An intricate winding of gaudy colours, without purpose or object, unless it be that one day it is destined for some vain ornament, to minister to the pride of your frail and giddy sex. Day after day has been employed upon this senseless task, and yet it is not half accomplished. The shade of each departed day falls upon our graves, and the worm exults as he beholds it, to know that we are hastening thither. Daughters, is there no better way to pass the fleeting hours?" The 4 elder sisters cast down their eyes as if abashed by the holy man's reproof, but Alice raised hers and bent them mildly on the friar. "Our dear mother," said the maiden, "heaven rest her soul." "Amen," cried the friar in a deep voice. "Our dear mother," faltered the fair Alice, "was living when these long tasks began, and bade us, when she should be no more, ply them in all discretion and cheerfulness in our leisure hours. She said that if in harmless mirth and maidenly pursuits we passed those hours together, they would prove the happiest and most peaceful of our lives, and that if in later times we went forth into the world and mingled with its cares and trials, if, allured by its temptations and dazzled by its glitter, we ever forgot that love and duty which should bind in holy ties the children of one loved parent. A glance at the old work of our common girlhood would awaken good thoughts of bygone days, and soften our hearts to affection and love. "Alice speaks truly, father," said the elder sister somewhat proudly, and so saying she resumed her work, as did the others. It was a kind of sampler of large size that each sister had before her. The device was of a complex and intricate description, and the pattern and colours of all 5 were the same. The sisters bent gracefully over their work. The monk, resting his chin upon his hands, looked from one to the other in silence. "How much better," he said at length, "to shun all such thoughts and chances, and in the peaceful shelter of the church devote your lives to heaven. Infancy, childhood, the prime of life and old age wither as rapidly as they crowd upon each other. Think how human dust rolls onward to the tomb, and turning your faces steadily towards that goal, avoid the cloud which takes its rise among the pleasures of the world and cheats the senses of their votaries. The veil, daughters, the veil." "Never, sisters," cried Alice. "Barter not the light and air of heaven, and the freshness of earth, and all the beautiful things which breathe upon it, for the cold cloister and the cell. Nature's own blessings are the proper goods of life, and we may share them sinlessly together. To die is our heavy portion, but oh, let us die with life about us. When our cold hearts cease to beat, let warm hearts be beating near. Let our last look be upon the bounds which God has set to his own bright skies, and not on stone walls and bars of iron. Dear sisters, let us live and die if you list in this green garden's compass. Only shun the gloom and sadness of a cloister, and we shall be happy." The tears fell fast from the maiden's eyes as she closed her impassioned appeal, and hid her face in the bosom of her sister. "Take comfort, Alice," said the eldest, kissing her fair forehead. "The veil shall never cast its shadow on thy young brow. How say you, sisters? For yourselves you speak, and not for Alice or for me." The sisters, as with one accord, cried that their lot was cast together, and that there were dwellings for peace and virtue beyond the convent's walls. "Father," said the eldest lady, rising with dignity, "you hear our final resolve. The same pious care which enriched the Abbey of St. Mary, and left us orphans to its holy guardianship, directed that no constraint should be imposed upon our inclinations, but that we should be free to live according to our choice. Let us hear no more of this, we pray you. Sisters, it is nearly noon. Let us take shelter until evening." With a reverence to the friar, the lady rose and walked towards the house, hand in hand with Alice. The other sisters followed. The holy man, who had often urged the same point before, but had never met with so direct a repulse, walked some little distance behind, with his eyes bent upon the earth, and his lips moving as if in prayer. As the sisters reached the porch, he quickened his pace and called upon them to stop. "Stay," said the monk, raising his right hand in the air, and directing an angry glance by turns at Alice and the eldest sister. "Stay and hear from me what these recollections are, which you would cherish above eternity, and awaken, if in mercy they slumbered, by means of idle toys. The memory of earthly things is charged in afterlife with bitter disappointment, affliction, death, with dreary change and wasting sorrow. The time will one day come when a glance at those unmeaning baubles will tear open deep wounds in the hearts of some among you, and strike to your inmost souls. When that hour arrives, and mark me, come it will, turn from the world to which you clung, to the refuge which you spurned. Find me the cell which shall be colder than the fire of mortals grows when dimmed by calamity and trial, and there weep for the dreams of youth. These things are heaven's will, not mine, said the friar, subduing his voice as he looked round upon the shrinking girls. The Virgin's blessing be upon you, daughters. With these words he disappeared through the postern, and the sisters, hastening into the house, were seen no more that day. But nature will smile, though priests may frown, and next day the sun shone brightly, and on the next, and the next again. And in the morning's glare and the evening's soft repose, the 5 sisters still walked, or worked, or beguiled the time by cheerful conversation in their quiet orchard. Time passed away as a tale that is told, faster indeed than many tales that are told, of which number I fear this may be one. The house of the 5 sisters stood where it did, and the same trees cast their pleasant shade upon the orchard grass. The sisters too were there, and lovely as at first, but a change had come over their dwelling. Sometimes there was the clash of armour and the gleaming of the moon on caps of steel, and at others jaded coursers were spurred up to the gate, and a female form glided hurriedly forth, as if eager to demand tidings of the weary messenger. A goodly train of knights and ladies lodged one night within the abbey walls, and next day rode away with 2 of the fair sisters among them. Then horsemen began to come less frequently, and seemed to bring bad tidings when they did, and at length they ceased to come at all, and footsore peasants slunk to the gate after sunset, and did their errand there by stealth. Once a vassal was dispatched in haste to the abbey at dead of night, and when morning came, there were sounds of woe and wailing in the sister's house. And after this, a mournful silence fell upon it, and knight or lady, horse or armour, was seen about it no more. There was a sullen darkness in the sky, and the sun had gone angrily down, tinting the dull clouds with the last traces of his wrath, when the same black monk walked slowly on with folded arms, within a stone's throw of the abbey. A blight had fallen on the trees and shrubs, and the wind at length, beginning to break the unnatural stillness that had prevailed all day, sighed heavily from time to time, as though foretelling in grief the ravages of the coming storm. The bat skimmed in fantastic flights through the heavy air, and the ground was alive with crawling things, whose instinct brought them forth to swell and fatten in the rain. No longer were the friar's eyes directed to the earth. They were cast abroad and roamed from point to point, as if the gloom and desolation of the scene found a quick response in his own bosom. Again he paused near the sister's house, and again he entered by the postern. But not again did his ear encounter the sound of laughter, or his eyes rest upon the beautiful figures of the 5 sisters. All was silent and deserted. The boughs of the trees were bent and broken, and the grass had grown long and rank. No light feet had pressed it for many, many a day. With the indifference or abstraction of one well accustomed to the change, the monk glided into the house and entered a low dark room. 4 sisters sat there. Their black garments made their pale faces whiter still, and time and sorrow had worked deep ravages. They were stately yet, but the flush and pride of beauty were gone. And Alice, where was she? In heaven. The monk, even the monk, could bear with some grief here, for it was long since these sisters had met, and there were furrows in their blanched faces which years could never plough. He took his seat in silence and motioned them to continue their speech. "They are here, sisters," said the elder lady in a trembling voice. "I have never borne to look upon them since, and now I blame myself for my weakness. What is there in her memory that we should dread? To call up our old days shall be a solemn pleasure yet." She glanced at the monk as she spoke, and opening a cabinet, brought forth the 5 frames of work completed long before. Her step was firm, but her hand trembled as she produced the last one, and when the feelings of the other sisters gushed forth at sight of it, her pent-up tears made way, and she sobbed, "God bless her!" The monk rose and advanced towards them. "It was almost the last thing she touched in health," he said in a low voice. "It was!" cried the elder lady, weeping bitterly. The monk turned to the second sister. "The gallant youth who looked into thine eyes and hung upon thy very breath when first he saw thee intent upon this pastime, lies buried on a plain whereof the turf is red with blood. Rusty fragments of armour, once brightly burnished, lie rotting on the ground, and are as little distinguishable for his as are the bones that crumble in the mould." The lady groaned and wrung her hands. "The policy of courts," he continued, turning to the 2 other sisters, "drew ye from your peaceful home to scenes of revelry and splendour. The same policy and the restless ambition of proud and fiery men have sent ye back, widowed maidens and humbled outcasts. Do I speak truly?" The sobs of the 2 sisters were their only reply. "There is little need," said the monk with a meaning look, "to fritter away the time in gewgaws which shall raise up the pale ghosts of hopes of early years. Bury them, heap penance and mortification on their heads, keep them down, and let the convent be their grave." The sisters asked for 3 days to deliberate, and felt that night as though the veil were indeed the fitting shroud for their dead joys. But morning came again, and though the boughs of the orchard trees drooped and ran wild upon the ground, it was the same orchard still. The grass was coarse and high, but there was yet the spot on which they had so often sat together, when change and sorrow were but names. There was every walk and nook which Alice had made glad, and the minster nave was one flat stone, beneath which she slept in peace. And could they, remembering how her young heart had sickened at the thought of cloistered walls, look upon her grave in garbs which would chill the very ashes within it? Could they bow down in prayer, and when all heaven turned to hear them, bring the dark shade of sadness on one angel's face? They sent abroad to artists of great celebrity in those times, and having obtained the church's sanction to their work of piety, caused to be executed in 5 large compartments of richly stained glass, a faithful copy of their old embroidery work. These were fitted into a large window, until that time bare of ornament, and when the sun shone brightly, as she had so well loved to see it, the familiar patterns were reflected in their original colours, and throwing a stream of brilliant light upon the pavement, fell warmly on the name of Alice. For many hours in every day, the sisters paced slowly up and down the nave, or knelt by the side of the flat broad stone. Only 3 were seen in the customary place after many years, then but 2, and for a long time afterwards but one solitary female bent with age. At length she came no more, and the stone bore 5 plain Christian names. That stone has worn away and been replaced by others, and many generations have come and gone since then. Time has softened down the colours, but the same stream of light still falls upon the forgotten tomb, of which no trace remains. And to this day, the stranger is shown in York Cathedral an old window called the 5 Sisters. This has been The 5 Sisters of York by Charles Dickens, performed by Rob Goll.